The term store in SharePoint is designed to allow us to have a global set of terms or tags that we can apply and manage across our entire SharePoint tenancy. Can we use those in Power Automate? Yes, we can, but you're going to have to work for it. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. The Managed Metadata field in SharePoint is, for me, really useful, having that global taxonomy where I can manage that set of terms or that set of tags everywhere within SharePoint. But it's a complex field. It's not just a simple case of being able to tag it with a piece of text and it all works. So what happens first of all if I try and do that within Power Automate? Let's go and have a look first of all, just to show you, because it will be an error that I'm sure most of you have seen at some point or other. So I'm going to base the demonstration on a form that's been submitted. So we are using something that is not aware of the term store. The reason for this is because we need to be able to take something that isn't aware of it, get the term information, and then post a file into SharePoint with the correct term tagged. In SharePoint, I have a document library which has got a standard set of metadata plus a tags metadata field here. And if I just bring in a picture, what we would actually see within SharePoint when I come and tag this is that I can come to my tags, I can select my term, and I can go and grab something from the term store and I can then apply it. Nice and simple. But now let's look at how we do that from Power Automate. So I'm going to come to my flow to start off with, and I'm going to build up based on a model that we saw when we were moving files from that have been submitted to forms to somewhere else in SharePoint. So I'm not going to go through that process again. However, what I am going to look at is the actual final tagging aspect of this file. So what I'm doing is I'm moving the file, I'm getting the file ID, and then I'm updating the file properties for that newly moved file with the tag that has been associated with it from Microsoft Forms. And the question that I'm going to use within Forms is, which country are you representing? So that is going to be a country that matches something in my term store. So let's come back to my flow again, and let's come and use the which country are you representing tag in my update file properties, because that would make sense. So I'm going to go and test it, and let's go and put a file through, and let's go and select something from Canada, upload a file, and let's submit. Okay, so my flow runs. It's going to find the information from Microsoft Forms. It's going to pass the relevant information out, and then it's going to move the file from OneDrive into SharePoint and tag it with the relevant information. But it fails. And it gives us this not really helpful information saying the data returned from the tagging UI was not formatted correctly. What that means in English is that I've given it part of the information that it needs. So if I look at what I've actually tried to tag it with, I've tried to tag it with Canada, but that's only half of the story. I also need to give it the term ID that it relates to within the term store. So what I'm talking about is if I come into my term store and I come into my list of countries and I come and find Canada, what I'm actually needing is this unique identifier. So this unique identifier that we have here needs to be part and parcel of the overall tag that we apply to the file. But I know the name of the country. I don't know the name of the unique identifier. So we need to find that out. Now, like I said in the intro, we have to work for it. It's not a simple process to go and find it. But we're going to try and walk it through about how we actually go and do this. So let's come back into my flow. And I'm just going to tuck a lot of this away into a scope, just so it's nice and neat and it's out of the way. So I'm just going to move all of my information, all of my actions into there, and let's hide that away. Okay, so I now need to start to try and find the relevant information. So how am I going to access the term store? Because I don't have an action in the SharePoint connector to automatically go and find all of that information. So if I come to my SharePoint connector and I search term, nothing. But we can access all of that information from the REST APIs, from the endpoints that we have available to SharePoint. So what does that mean? That means that I'm going to get down and dirty again with the HTTP request to SharePoint action. So I'm going to use this HTTP request. I'm going to call out into SharePoint and say, give me all of the terms. Now, for me to really build up everything that I need to start building a HTTP request, as well as having my request to SharePoint, I also need two pieces of information. I need to know the term group that this term belongs to, and also the term set. Now in this case, I'm going to use compose actions to effectively hard code these into my flows. So I'm going to create myself, first of all, two compose actions, and that is going to be my term group. And I'm going to create a second one, which is going to be my term set. And these are the unique IDs that I need to pass into my HTTP request in order to get the list of terms back from SharePoint. So I've got these two inputs. I need the values to go into here. So where am I going to go for this? I'm going to go back into my term set or into my term store. And what I'm interested in, first of all, is my term group, which is this top level here. This is called my global what I've called global terms. And I'm going to take this unique identifier from here and I'm going to copy that by clicking on the link. Let's come back to my flow and let's paste that in. A lovely GUID. And let's go back to my term store, and I now need my term set, which is countries. And I'm going to copy the unique identifier for that. And I'm going to bring that into my second compose, which is my term set. It's getting ugly already, but it's going to work. So now I've got those, I know they're populated. Let's just shrink those back down again. And actually what I'm going to do, just so that I can keep this nice and tidy, is just pop these back into a scope so I can collapse all this down again in a moment. And everything we're going to do in this term is going to be directed towards getting the term ID. And I'll drag more things into there as we go through. But now I've got the information that I need for my HTTP request. So I now need to build it. So let's start by selecting my, my address. So let's go and find my FlowBites site. I'm getting information. So I'm actually saying, give me the information. And the reason why I'm selecting the site address here, rather than going directly to the term store, is because each site that gets created is automatically associated with the default term store. In SharePoint Online, we only have one term store. So therefore, I'm going to associate with the default. So I can go straight to the site that I'm interacting with. So now I can start building up my URI. So here's what I prepared earlier, just to make it nice and simple. So you're not going to watch me typing huge amounts, but this is the API request. But effectively, what am I doing? I'm building up my API call. I'm saying that I want to access the term store. I'm then saying, give me the groups, where the group ID matches the group ID that I've put into my compose, and we'll replace that in a moment. I'm then saying, now look at the term sets, give me the term set ID, or the term set belonging to the ID that I'm going to put in there, and give me the terms. Now, there's a lot of information that comes back from the term store. And really, all I'm interested in are two things. The ID and the labels. The labels being what I actually see as the option when I go and select it from the term store. So in this case, I'm using just the English version, so it's giving me Australia, Belgium, and so on. So let's start building that up then into my flow. So let's go and paste the URI in there. So my term group ID, I've got that already because I put that into my composed my term group. So I'm going to replace that with the dynamic content selected that I've got earlier on. The reason why I'm using the compose there is because I can simply replace that that one option later. And if I'm doing multiple calls to go and get terms, I can just replace it in one place and I can reuse it. And I'm going to do the same for the term set. So now that is going to give me an API. It's going to make an API call. It's going to give me some terms that have been pulled back from the relevant group in the relevant term set, and it's going to give me just the ID and labels. Let's go and have a look at what that looks like. I'm just going to put a terminate in after this, just to stop it running any further for now. And I'm going to rerun my previous run. Okay, so now that's run successfully. Let's go and have a look. Okay, we're looking good. We've got a list. We've got a number of outputs. So at least I know that my my REST API call works. Now I just need to make sense of the information that's actually been brought back. But before I can make it make sense in Power Automate, let's go and have a look at what we've actually got. So in here, I've just fired up Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to paste my outputs into here, just so that we can see exactly what we've got. And now this is looking quite interesting. I've got an ID and I've got a label. So if I go and find, let's go and search for something at the start. Let's just go, I'm being really lazy here and not scrolling. Let's go and look for Australia. So here I've got a label for Australia and I've got an ID. So I'm looking for Australia. Let's go and look at the unique identifier, D9E2. D9E2. So I know that this is the information that I want. So I've got my list of terms back. Now I need to try and find out, based on the inputs from my form, I need to find out which ID I need to pass in into my update to actually get my tag applying correctly. Again, we need to work quite hard for this. So bear with me on this one. So I've got my JSON coming back. At the moment, I've got nothing that's usable. So what's the first thing that we do if we have some JSON that at the moment we don't have dynamic content for? Well, let's make our life easier and make some dynamic content. Let's parse it. Let's use the parse JSON action, and I'm going to give it some information that I'm getting back from my HTTP request. Let's just quickly hit my Visual Studio Code back up again and look at what we actually want. So this is the body that's coming back. And what do I actually want from it? Actually, I want the array, and the array is denoted by the fact that I've got a square bracket at the start of the value. I want to take the value array. I don't particularly want anything else, so I'm going to just ignore everything else. Just give me that. Just give me that array, and then we can work with it. So what I'm going to be looking for is the body of the output, but the value node, the value JSON node that comes back. Okay, easiest way of being able to do this. First of all, put the body into the in there. That's not going to give us what we want. That's giving us everything, but we want to be more specific. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just Control A on that so I can copy everything that's in there, and I'm going to press Control C to copy it to my clipboard. And now I'm going to delete that out of there, because what I'm going to do is switch to my expression editor. And in my expression editor, I'm going to paste in what I've just actually copied, which is the actual definition for what that dynamic content was. So that has just saved me a little bit of typing, and I can paste that in. But I want more than the body, I want the value. So I'm also going to add on there a request to just give me the value. And so when I press OK, that is now going to just give me the outputs, and it's going to, if we come back here, it's going to give me everything that is contained in this JSON part of the output that I'm getting from my HTTP request. Hopefully you're still following me. But what I need to do now is generate a schema so that I can then use dynamic content, because that's going to make my life easier. That's what I want to do. So I can see here that I've got a value. I've got two options. I can copy everything from value from the start of that square bracket all the way down to the bottom of my, so I can go scroll. Oops, too far. And I can copy that part. That seems like hard work to me. Call me lazy, call me efficient, whatever you want. All I'm going to say is that I know that this is an array, so I'm going to ignore everything else, and I'm going to just put the square bracket at the end of that first JSON entry. And let's copy all of that now. So this is now going to help me generate from sample. I can paste it into there, and let's press done. So it is giving me an array, which is fine, because that's exactly what it is. It's an array of items that's come back from the term store. And I'm just going to give that a quick rename, and I'm going to call that my process terms, because that's what we're doing. We're just processing it so I can then use it. But now, I need to start now trying to find where Australia or Canada, I need to find where the country that I'm looking for exists in that particular list of terms that's come back. Now again, not particularly clean, not particularly the nicest way, doesn't seem like the nicest way of doing things, and I will continue to see if I can find a better way of doing this. But what I'm going to do, just to show this, is I'm going to use a compose to start off with, and this is going to be my term that I'm looking for. And in there, I'm going to give it some dynamic content. So I know by looking at my JSON output that the name of the term that I'm looking for is tucked away inside the labels array inside my array. This is why it gets messy, is because we've got an array inside an array. So this is the reason why it's not particularly clean, and we have to work hard to go and find all this information. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that just give me the first label that comes back and give me the name of it. So let's come back to my flow again. What I'm going to do now that I've got my composed term is I'm going to process the labels to find the specific entry that I'm looking for, whether that is Australia, whether it's Canada, whether it's the UK, wherever it appears in my term set, I need to be able to find it. And again, I'm going to show you a slightly easier way that I'm going to use for this, because labels, if we revisit our VS Code, is an array. So that means that if I just go and start searching through labels, looking for the name, then potentially I've got to parse it again. I'm going to have another loop. It's getting even more messier than what I'm already happy with. Okay, so I'm going to grab the labels, and I'm just going to take the first entry from labels, and I'm going to select the name. And that I'm then going to use as a way of being able to try and find what I'm looking for in the overall array. So I'm going to put labels on there first of all. And yes, I am going to need to loop, because I'm going to have to loop around every single term, because every single term in the array has an array of labels. How confusing is this game? But let's carry on, because it will eventually, hopefully, make sense. So I'm going to take those labels, and I'm going to say that for the term that I'm looking for, I've just copied that again, just like I did earlier, and I'm going to switch to my expression editor, and I'm going to paste that into the dynamic content. And let's delete the stuff that I don't want around it. Now I'm interested in the first entry, so I'm going to use the expression first, just to give me the first entry that comes back in that array. So it's going to be my default label. So I've put my brackets around that to say just give me the first entry. And if I put a question mark after that, let's just move that across a little bit more. If I put a question mark and then select the name that comes back, that is going to allow me to go and find just the name entry, just this row, or this row, or this row. It's going to look for just the first name entry that comes back from my labels. Good. So I'm just going to test this very quickly, just so that we can see what's happening so far. Let's save and test. Okay, good. That's run. It's taken a little bit of time, but it's finally run. So if I now go and look at my apply to each, and I expand out my term, I can see that I've got Australia, I've got Belgium, Belize, and so on. So it's giving me the countries. If only this was the end. But we've got now our compose with something that we can now use again. So let's go and edit. So what am I going to do now? I'm going to put a condition in here. So what I'm going to do inside my condition is I'm going to be checking for when I have a match from the term that's been brought through from my compose above, where it matches the information that is coming in from Microsoft Forms. So let's go and put into here. So I'm saying where my condition is equal to which country are you representing from my form. So whatever comes through now, it's going to try and match something. But I need to now store the ID that it finds in this particular loop in something that is going to persist and allow me to reuse further down my flow for when it actually comes to tagging the document. So what am I going to need to use? I need something that's going to be able to persist, so I need to use a variable. So let's come up to the, I like to create my variables right at the very top. So let's come and initialize myself a new variable. This is going to be my term ID. Okay, and let's now come down to where I'm actually going to use it, which is in my apply to each. Let's put that into my condition. And if we do have a match, then I'm going to say I'm going to set the variable where the term ID, and I'm going to set it to the ID. Is that right? Let's just have a quick check. The ID that's coming back from my REST call. ID. So at this point, I've now got a variable that is going to be populated with a term ID. So now I need to create myself something that is going to be pushed into SharePoint now to give it the right format. So when I come to tag my document, and I'm going to get rid of my terminate now. When I come to tag my document, it's tagged with the right value. So the final thing that I'm going to do, before I hide all this away in a scope again, is just add another action. Let's add a compose in. And this is going to be my term definition that I'm going to use within SharePoint. Now, what's the format which I need in SharePoint? I need the name or the label of the term that I want to apply, and then a pipe, and then the term ID. As dynamic content I want, if I go and select my country, so which country are you representing, then a pipe, and then I can use my term ID variable. So that's the definition that I need. Label, term ID. Once I've got this, I can then go and put this down in my area where I'm uploading my files. Let's bring it all the way down. We know this fails, so let's get rid of that. And let's replace it with my outputs, which was my term definition. Whew, okay. A lot of hard work here. Let's go and test it. Let's make sure it's working. So I'm going to set this to manually test again. Okay, and let's go and fill in another response. Let's go and select India this time. Let's go for something towards the middle of my list. Let's upload the file. Let's go have a nice picture of a cake. And submit. So my flow starts to run. So let's follow it down. I've initialized my variable, my term ID, which we're using later on. In my term ID, in my scope, get term at the moment, I've got my term group and my term set, which is giving me the information to try and hone in on the terms that I want to select. I make a HTTP request to SharePoint, and I use that term group ID and the term set ID in my URI, in my call, to go and get the list of terms back. And I've used a select statement on the end of it just to say, give me the ID, just give me the labels, because I'm not bothered about anything else that you want to give me. And it gives me a list of terms back. And it gives me the ID plus the labels array for my terms. I then process that, so I pass the JSON. So I take what the output of the body is from my HTTP request, and I make it into dynamic content. From there, we have no choice but to loop around all of the items in our term. At the moment, like I say, I will try and find a nicer way of being able to do this. But I've composed my term. So effectively, I've taken for each label or each set of labels that we pull out from our terms, look at the first one, give me that label. And I'm then using that label as a way of matching in my loop to say, if this matches the country that's been selected for my form, or whatever other input we decide to use, it's going to then set the variable to say that the term ID is so-and-so. And that is the GUID for that specific term. From there, we built out our term definition. And you can see here that it's comprised of the label, then a pipe, and then the term ID. So now I can take that, I can use that in my update file properties action, which I've got all the way back down here. You can see here that I've given it the tag information of India. It's quite happy, it's given me the thumbs up, it's given me the ticks. Has it worked? Let's come into SharePoint. Here's my cake, and here's my tag with India applied to it. There's a lot of hard work. That is probably one of the more complex interactions that you're ever going to have to do within SharePoint, because you're not just looking at directly at something that's in SharePoint as a list. We are having to go away and call out to the SharePoint Term Store in order to find that information. But I hope that's useful. I appreciate that you may have to watch that through a number of times to follow absolutely everything. There's a lot of moving parts. But I hope it's been useful to go through that exercise, just see what you can achieve by calling the REST APIs, by being able to interact with more than just the basics that we have within SharePoint, and being able to use that really useful global taxonomy term store that we have in SharePoint for anything that we create and tag using Power Automate. As always, I hope that's useful. If you do have questions, please feel free to reach out in the comments. Feel free to find me on Twitter at MattWeston365. Feel free to connect to me on LinkedIn. Just search for Matt Weston, and I will be happy to help you in any way that I can. As always, please like and subscribe, because I am going to keep posting content like this, where I'm not just posting how-tos, I'm trying to put this into something that is going to be useful for you going forward. But for now, look after yourselves, take care everybody, and I'll speak to you again soon.